My imaginary friend in paranormal childhood. Growing up, I had an imaginary friend. It creeped my mother out because I would talk to the friend, describe and do things that it told me to do. She had blonde hair and pigtails, blue eyes, and wore light pink overalls and white tennis shoes. Her name was Emily. Logically, you would think that I have built a friend in the image of myself or someone that I knew. However, I have dark brown hair and eyes, and I only wore dresses and skirts as a child. To add to that, my grandmother took care of me. I didn't even start going to school until first grade, and even then, I didn't know anyone under who fit the description. I did things that Emily told me to do, including to call 911 one time, and that I hid under my bed after the police arrived. I remember writing on the wooden gate with a permanent marker, and my dad yelling at me. The times that I left the house and walked out of the neighborhood. The time I tried to take my cousin with me. I creeped my mom out. It scared her even worse when I would draw pictures of Emily. A few years ago, she asked me to draw her again, and I did. Same girl. Emily was fun and playful. Until I started public school. That's when the bad things started happening. Things that got me in trouble with my parents. Sometimes, I would get scared at night and sleep with my grandmother. I absolutely, to this day, cannot stand closets. I hate them. Especially at night. They have to be closed, otherwise I feel like something is watching me. Her closet gave me the worst feeling. Same with the one in my bedroom. I can to this day feel something watching me. I didn't even play hide and seek in them. So as I was saying, I sometimes got scared and would sleep in with either my grandmother or at the foot of my parents' bed. I would wake up early in the morning and hear people talk in the den. Full-on conversations, chanting even. It differed. Naturally, I would get up and enter the den to join my family. Nobody was in there. Not even the dog. Sometimes I would wake up at night and see bright lights floating around the den. I thought they were fairies. Bright orange-yellow lights. There are tons of experience I had growing up, but I'll add a few more. A few years ago, my parents decided to leave me home alone, which I didn't like and they didn't like, but at least I had the dogs. Our alarm is set to 2 options, motion on, which nobody is home, and motion off, someone is home. I went into the den where the sensors are and the alarm goes off, and I freak out because it's the big alarm that can be heard from outside. I run to the alarm and turn it off, and wait for the company to call me to check on my safety, yell at my parents over the phone for turning motion on, put the alarm on motion off and go back to what I was doing. I'm now in the computer room, dogs are locked up, and the alarm sounds. Again. This happened at least 3 times. The alarm company called me back each time and told me that the alarm was set correctly to motion off. He proceeded to tell me someone was in the house with me, and that just set me off. I'm already creeped out being home alone. We had the alarm checked after, nothing was wrong with it. So why am I freaked out being home alone? I see things and reflections, people. I will look at mirrors at night. Things have flown across my room. I used to have nightmares about being possessed. My parents' religion didn't believe in crosses, but my mother put a cross in my room to protect me. It worked. However, I would wake up and the cross would be knocked over. Dogs bark in the hallway at nothing. My mother has seen a man in the hallway a few times. She also has seen people who are not really there. My mother's side of the family, women, have experiences like this. But for some reason, mine is the creepiest of them all. I was hoping it would end with me moving to a new apartment for college. Nope. Had to have this apartment blessed, because my roommates were experiencing things too. They immediately asked me about it. You're psychic, right? Have you felt anything? When do I not? I can elaborate on other things too. Feel free to ask questions. Not so imaginary friend. Okay, I've never posted this online before, I don't think. But I think this is the place for this story. From the age 3 until about 8 or 9, I've had an imaginary friend. Except she wasn't imaginary at all. She was a lovely African-American woman by the name of Coco, and she was around early to mid-30s. She wore a blue and white outfit that I think would have resembled an old maid's outfit. My parents were afraid of her because I played with her in my closet, so didn't even ask me much about her to learn more. Something that really annoys me as an adult that wishes I had more info on. Coco was my friend. She was only ever kind and sweet. She played with me and gave me advice. She was in my life for years, but only ever in that one house. About a year before we moved out of that house, I was getting made fun for being almost 10 with an invisible friend. People were making fun of me a lot for that, actually. So I asked Coco to go away. And she did. I mourned her for a while, and then just kind of let it go. But I've never forgotten her face. I would recognize her photo if I saw it now. Some of the strangest parts were that I lived in a house that had been built for my family, so no one had lived or died in the house previously. It was an old farming town, though, so I have no idea what was on the land prior to us moving in there. Also, being an old farming town in what was then pretty rural Canada, I'd never seen a black person in real life at the time I began seeing Coco. So my parents had always thought it was strange that I'd invent one as a friend. The first black family moved into town when I was 7 or 8 years old. Though of course I may have seen someone on TV. This was the late 80s. One story that really stands out to me is that one night I was fighting with my mom over a new bed I wanted. I claimed I would not sleep in my old bed anymore, and pulled all the sheets and blankets off and slept on the floor. But when I woke up, I was tucked into a perfectly made bed. I don't remember if I asked Coco about it or not, but to this day, my mom swears she did not make that bed. I really like to have a solid answer of whether I somehow invented her to deal with some childhood trauma I experienced, or if she was truly a friendly ghost. But either way, she really did enrich my youth and taught me a lot about life. Sounds crazier when I type this all out, honestly. Adah, my imaginary friend. True story. I used to live in a small 150-year-old hospital that turned into a house. My mom told me before that when I was a little kid, I always played alone. When my mom asked me if I had any friends, I always answered yes. Her name is Adah. Days before my birthday, my mom asked me to invite Adah, and I was very excited. I turned to my left and said, "Did you hear that, Adah? Mom said you're invited to my party." My mom got scared at first, but she thought it was just an imaginary friend, so she just went with it. By the way, I have no memory about this Adah. I started talking to my parents about Adah since my birthday party. According to myself, Adah is a small girl, innocent looking, soft voice, quite shy, long black hair and pretty too. She had pale skin and reddish plump lips. She had tuberculosis when she was a kid. Her dad is a doctor and her mom is a businesswoman. When I mentioned to them that Adah's hands were always cold, they started to get worried. They had investigated about the origins of the house and found out that it used to be a hospital more than a century ago. There was a kid who died in the hospital because of tuberculosis. Her father happened to be a doctor in the town. Disappointed in himself for not being able to save his daughter, he committed suicide. His wife killed herself weeks after that. The name of the girl was Adah. My parents panicked and didn't know what to do. They consulted experts on how they can make Adah leave me alone for good. They followed the instructions, and within days, Adah finally stopped hanging out with me. For days I cried and cried, calling out to Adah. I told my parents, "It's your fault why she left. She was crying that night, and she told me that you wanted her to leave, and now she's gone." And then one day, Adah came back. I didn't tell my parents that she came back, but they were smart enough to figure it all out somehow. My parents talked to me, saying that I'm keeping Adah from being with her parents. They told me that she has to leave because she's happier with her parents. Later that day, I told my parents that Adah left, and she thanked me for letting her go and being her friend, and that she has had so much fun hanging out with me. This is a long story, isn't it? I hope you read it all. I was absolutely freaking out when my parents told me this story. I had no freaking idea this happened to me, and I have absolutely no memory of this. Also, my mom told me that the experts they consulted said that ghosts look solid and not transparent like we see in the movies. That explains a lot, since I wasn't able to see her as a ghost, but as a living person. Most people have probably seen a ghost before, but because they are solid, we cannot tell the difference from them and living people. They also said that kids have a better ability to see ghosts than adults do. Although Adah sounds harmless, I thought it would be best not to involve ourselves to spirits. This involves using spirit boards, going to haunted houses, etc. If you do these things just for fun, it's considered disrespectful to spirits. You'll risk disturbing them and making them angry, and you'll never know that they have followed you home. Spirits are like people. There are good ones and bad ones. I'm lucky enough that I encountered a good one. If not, I can't even imagine what would have happened to me and my family. There are also demons who impersonate dead people to tell you lies or manipulate you into doing things. We shouldn't make friends with them or even talk to them, because they would have a reason to stay. Unless you want them to stay, that is. Just a small update. I finally found the word I was looking for. The experts I were talking about are called mediums.